And there's other layers to the ongoing government discord, internal coalition feuds between Likud and the far-right Otzma Yehudit parties. National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir has a list of demands for the ruling party in order to resume any form of cooperation, according to reports which claim that the minister is demanding a significant military operation in the West Bank, approving and advancing portions of the judicial overhaul. We know what sentiment that carries in the public, and more involvement in matters of top national security, where he's been notably sidelined. Ben-Gvir's party last week announced it would stop taking part in parliamentary votes, citing the government's quote-unquote feeble response to rocket fire from Gaza and other grievances. Now we have two guests joining us here, Gil Hoffman, the executive director of Honest Reporting, and Professor Asher Blas, the former chief economist at the Bank of Israel, a lecturer now at Ashkelon College. And thanks for joining us. Look, first, Professor Blas, I want to just get down to the, we're looking at real numbers here. I mean, just a couple months ago, it was quietly reported, I'd argue it was lost in the noise of other issues, that the so-called government night, this negotiation night over the budget, ended in an unprecedented fiasco. No true agreements on the budget, just inflated demands all around. So now what? Is this close to realistic? Can these new big budgets be passed at all?
Well, I would say the following. In terms of the overall budget, it's true that there is a much larger transfer of budgets to the ultra-Orthodox population. At the same time, I would put it like this. The overall budget could have been a lot worse. In other words, there is an amount of fiscal restraint in totality, while the ultra-Orthodox are getting a lot more. In total, the budget is a not bad budget in terms of the totals, in terms of the deficits, and in terms of overall fiscal macroeconomic policy.
All right, there's some relief in hearing that right now. Look, Gil, I want to bring you into this as well. Look, as this budget emerges, we're getting a lot more detail now. Many Israelis, not just on the secular left, are arguing along these lines that I make, that this sort of supported from the outside poverty among the ultra-Orthodox has grown too costly to ignore. No end in sight, though?
Well, right now, the ultra-Orthodox are part of the governing coalition, and the parties traditionally that are part of the governing coalition receive funding for their pet causes. It's been part of every budget with every coalition. It's always criticized, and rightfully so, by those who are not part of the governing coalition. So you remember, David, the previous government had no ultra-Orthodox, and they mocked the budget because it had money allocated for food for stray cats. And now the ultra-Orthodox are there, and they're getting money for their pet causes. And the people who are not ultra-Orthodox are alarmed by it and upset.
Well, look, there wasn't $1 billion earmarked for stray cats, okay? Look, I want to take this a little further. Lawmaker from the United Torah Judaism, Moshe Gafni, used to be the head of the party, infamously began the budget talks months ago, telling the assembled press at that time that this would be a quote-unquote hour of revenge, with the budget now. Talk about this animosity that seems to be fueling what they perceive as outside sort of, or state establishment pressure to secularize. Where does this come from?
I don't think that they're trying to make people who are not ultra-Orthodox more Orthodox. They're trying to take care of their own cause, and they take care of their constituents very well. The ultra-Orthodox have had wonderful representation for themselves, and I can understand those who believe that ends up in the long run harming the population because they're growing and they're not receiving the education in math and English that they need. But on the other hand, David, understand the largest allocation is for teachers who have been paid less and work longer hours because the ultra-Orthodox schools last until 4 o'clock and the secular schools last until 1:30.
Okay, well, there's a lot we can break down even within the teachers, the schools as well. It's a complicated picture. Professor Blas, I want to bring you back here. Thanks for being with us again. Look, the economic forecast, a lot has been talked about that the next 2 years. In light of this potential budget now, are we seeing downturns already? It's hard to know. With a lot of the hysteria, I'll say it that way, going on around current events, people, sounding the alarm bells. Are we seeing sectors, showing damage already? What do we expect in the next 2 years?
Well, I think the events that you're talking about are more related to the legal reforms of the legal revolution.
The latest unrest, yes.
Yes, and it's very possible that the way the public would react to what's going on now with the ultra-Orthodox budgets would be different, but for the unrest that has been occurring in the past few weeks. Now, there is a hope that there will be some kind of settlement and perhaps the genie, if you will be put back in the bottle. But that being said, there is a long-term problem between economic growth and the development of the ultra-Orthodox community as it stands right now. There was a time when we were talking about maybe 3-4% of the population, but now it's much higher, and among children, it's very high.
And climbing rapidly,
and,
right.
Yes, and the long-term economic forecast for Israel will be dependent on higher participation in the workforce, better education with skills that are transferable to the workforce. And while the public at large was able to carry this burden when the ultra-Orthodox community was small, it will not be able to do so and probably will be unwilling to do so as the ultra-Orthodox community gets bigger. And I think in the long term, there will have to be changes in the way that community.
And I want to just chime in again saying we don't see those changes happening now. That's not part of the docket here going forward. Gil, maybe last question for you here and on Ben-Gvir, the Minister Ben-Gvir. The sources in Likud were quoted as saying, upon all this, his unhappiness on display, that he's free to leave the government. Really? I mean, is Likud ready to abandon them as a partner?
No one would be stupid to leave the government right before they pass a budget. Ben-Gvir is about to get money for his own pet causes, so his threats are not serious in any way. One important thing to focus on here, David, before it ends, the previous government that had an Arab party allocated an unprecedented amount for Arab parties and their consensus causes of improving their roads and their schools and fighting inter-Arab crime. This government is allocating the exact same amount, even though they don't have an Arab there. Okay. And that's something that maybe would make it more palatable for those who are so upset right now.
We certainly we get into that topic a bit more in our show here as well. But Gil Hoffman, we appreciate you being with us as well. Professor Asher Blass, just getting into the budget issues here. Appreciate you both being with us.